Questions. Hey guys, Jonah Ribs. I've been playing Valkit for oh yes, you guys are making it ding. Jobim and WCB are hanging out with me on Google Plus, watching me do this lecture. So yeah, I've been playing Valkit for 1 day, so I have a vast, comprehensive knowledge of the deck. I'm not sure that I'm going to run it in the MOCS on Saturday, but I do feel like I've sort of done enough testing that I am where I'd want to be to run it. Maybe I have a couple of hours of crunching numbers to do still, but I'm close-ish. So I'm going to tell you basically what the problems are in building the deck, I guess is what I'd call them. Problems, choke points. The first problem is that the mana is actually very difficult to make work, which really surprised me how true that was in a deck. Like, you have 4 Rampant Growth, 4 Kelmy Hard Expedition, Explore doesn't really help that much, but 2 Overgrown Battlement, Cultivate, 3 Harrow, Oracle of Moldiah. It doesn't seem like the mana should be so bad. The problem though is that you just don't have very much green, and you can run fetch lands. Well, yeah, you don't have much green, and you really don't ever want to play more than 2 forests in a game. Valkit needs 6 mountains in play to trigger, so your goal is to play a bunch of mountains. Makes sense. You also need a lot of basic mountains because, God, that's irritating. Wizards, fix your software. You also need a lot of mountains, obviously, because up until your 6th mountain, you don't get any triggers. So in this deck, which has 11 mountains, there are 5 that are effectively triggering Valkit. Sort of 6, because Harrow puts 2 mountains into play at once, Primeval Titan puts 2 mountains into play at once, Kelmy Hard Expedition puts 2 mountains into play at once, and whenever you go from 4 to 6, the 5th and 6th trigger it when they come into play simultaneously. So you have a whole ton of basic mountains in 4 Valakit, which gives you 15 red-only sources in a deck with 6 red spells main. And then you actually only have 13 currently green sources. And it's not like there's filtering or anything to help you hit those 13 green sources. That's just all you have. So one thing I'll probably do is cut an 11th mountain for 1 more fetch land. That gets you into sort of a danger zone where you potentially run out of basic mountains, but I feel like if you're competent with the deck, you can take that in stride and still get a lot out of it, and the value that you gain from having access to 1 more green land early is much more considerable than what you lose from not having that mountain. You could also play just 1 more land and board it out sometimes. I don't know, those are 2 options, but basically you lose to your lands a decent amount, and you also mulligan because of your lands. You really can't keep a hand with no green sources, and so you're trying to hit a 13 of every time you look at a starting hand. One thing I did consider was Artifact Mana Search, but I don't think there's a good option in Standard right now, unfortunately. Yeah, the other problem, get rid of the lands. The other problem is just balancing threat density with acceleration, and I think this deck does a really, really good job of that because it has a lot of cards that do both. Grazing Gladeheart is sort of, we'll talk about that later. But these 4 Kelmy Hard Expedition, and I hate Moto, and 3 Harrow, they're sort of threats in themselves. They you can definitely win games without ever resolving a Primeval Titan or Avenger, just by playing the Valakits and burning people out by fetching a bunch of mountains. And I've done that. And the other thing these guys do is that they're instant speed, and so rather than just being sorcery speed, accelerate on your own, they can interact with the other deck fairly well to burn creatures during combat and end of turn and beginning of combat, and burn Deceiver Exarch when they're trying to Splinter Twin it, stuff like that. Of course, you need Valakut and 4 mountains in play before that turns on, but you can get there. Primeval Titan, I'm playing 4 Green Sun Zenith. An amazing number of lists only play 3, and that seems terrible, because the entire deck seems to just be playing Primeval Titan. Once you do, you generally win next turn. Avenger of Zendikar is just a really solid 9th threat. And then we have the other creatures are just Green Sun Zenith targets. So Battlement is a way to accelerate with Zenith. There really isn't a worthwhile 1-drop. Like, you could play Birds of Paradise, but you have 10 2-casting cost accelerants plus Pyroclasm and Burst Lightning that you're likely to want to play at the beginning of the game, and so actually Zenithing for Birds of Paradise doesn't happen much. Even if you did, it's just gonna die a huge amount of the time to like a lightning bolt or something, because you don't really have creatures, so all that burn and creature removal is stuck in their hand. So Oracle, Overgrown Battlement, simple enough. Gladeheart, I like it main over Obstinate Baloth, who is in the board and comes in as well. The reason is that the deck has 3 Harrow and 2 Calmy Heart Expeditions, plus all these fetch lands. So against mono red, you can set up a situation where you Green Sun Zenith for Gladeheart and gain 8 life pretty easily. And if you really go all out for it, you can gain more than 8 life. Generally I've found like 6 or 8 life is what I sort of hit. So against mono red, I'll start out early turns trying to play Pyroclasms. My mid-game plan is to gain a bunch of life to get me time with Gladeheart, and then you sort of, there's a point where you stop trying to gain life and start trying to kill them. And usually you get 6 to 8, I think. And then the other stuff is just growth. So, oh, and Inferno Titans. Those kill them pretty well. So the other problem is just being able to interact with the other deck. You can't throw much into the deck because you don't have much room. You have 27 land, and that's already sort of cutting it close. You have all this acceleration and the threats, and so this list has found 4 spots for actual interactive cards, and then sort of interacts with Harrow and Calmy Heart Expedition, which is nice. These are really good though. The main deck, Pyroclasms and Burst Lightnings, get you a lot of value. Burst Lightning is better than Lightning Bolt in a lot of places. One cool thing is that you can Clasm and Burst Lightning in the same turn to kill a Titan. So that's a quick overview of the main and sort of like what's going on. So you can lose to drawing mana badly, you can lose to not drawing a threat, and you can lose to just not being able to interact. But the deck, I think, does a decent job of balancing those priorities and playing cards which fill multiple roles. The sideboard is a mess right now. The Combust plan isn't very good against Twin. Combust is actually a valuable card against a lot of the random decks in the format, though. It's still on my board. It's okay versus Twin. I would love it if there was a better option. I've considered the Mora side because it seems very easy to play a basic swamp. I think the problem with it is that you fetch the swamp tapped almost always, and after you fetch the swamp tapped, they can usually, if they're quick enough to combo before you were going to kill them anyway, they can usually just tap down your swamp with an Exarch, it seems like, then untap and kill you. Verdant Catacombs does get a swamp untapped, as does Harrow, but that's about all you've got. So I don't really know how to beat Twin. The other stuff on the board, Pyroclasm comes in versus all the creature decks pretty much. Obstinate Baloth against red. Grazing Gladeheart can stay in the main against some of the lower control decks. Some of them try to tempo you out post board. A lot of them don't, and then it comes out, but if they are trying to tempo you out, like a blue-white control deck has a lot of trouble dealing with Gladeheart. Nature's Claims, stuff like Birthing Pod, I think you bring it in versus Twin, I'm not sure. Possible that you don't. And yeah, I'm not very happy with Nature's Claim on the board either. The board is what needs the most work. Second Oracle, it's just general value against decks which can't really kill your creatures. The Acidic Slime is there as a Zenith target versus anything that's going to be bringing in, I don't know, anything. It's almost main deckable. It's just super valuable card. If you have room for it post board, you can bring it in and get some value out of it for sure. Gaia's Revenge and Artisan of Kozilek are versus control. Artisan mainly blue-black. When you cast it, you can return a Titan to the battlefield, basically. And Gaia's Revenge just hits for 8 a lot. And yeah, that's the deck. Yeah, I've got tons of matches of me playing it, but that's talking about what's actually going on in it. As far as deck building, not happy with these cards, quite happy with the main. Maybe fix the mana base a little bit. Everything else is pretty good, I think. Summoning Trap probably goes in this pile. But to be honest, there's just not that much that's great to have on the board for this deck. It's a very, very tight main deck. Okay, so that's Valakut.